I never imagined that at 62 I would be living alone in this house. As I ascend the stairs every evening, I can't help but think about all the generations of my family who have done the same thing as I run my fingertips down the sleek wooden railing. I've spent the most of my life in this Maple Street home, which has been in my family for more than a century. My husband Robert left me for his 25-year-old secretary 20 years ago. My name is Caroline Mitchell. At the time, our son Tommy was just 12 years old. As if it were yesterday, I can still clearly recall the day Robert informed me he was leaving. He was standing in our kitchen, fiddling with his wedding band while avoiding eye contact. "I apologize, Caroline." His voice was hardly audible above a whisper when he spoke. "I never intended for this to happen." My knuckles grew white as I stood there, holding onto the kitchen counter. "Does she make you happy, Robert?" Trying to speak steadily, I asked. He nodded without turning to face me. "I will see to it that Tommy is looked after." "Well, I'll pay alimony." I'll give him that he did fulfill that promise. The money came in each and every month. In order to pay for our daily expenditures, I worked additional hours at the marketing agency and saved every cent for Tommy's college fund. Fortunately, the house, my grandmother's last present to me, was already paid for. Throughout everything, this place has been my fulcrum. On one occasion, filmmakers utilized it for a historical piece on the Civil War era, claiming it caught the spirit of the time flawlessly. I was unable to sell it, but the producer offered to purchase it for a ridiculous sum of money. This house is more than simply windows and walls. It is my history and legacy. I put myself into my career in parenting Tommy when Robert departed. Having a date? It never seemed right. Every time my coworkers tried to introduce me, I turned them down. I jokingly said, "I'm married to my career," but in reality I had given up on love. My entire existence revolved on Tommy. I saw to it that he had the love, support, and direction he needed. We had our routines: Sunday movie evenings, schoolwork at the kitchen table, and breakfast together every morning. Because of his father's alimony money, he attended a reputable college and graduated with honors. Last year, I made an effort to be friendly when Tommy brought Amy home from work. Her constant smiles, compliments on the property, and inquiries about family photographs gave the impression that she was kind enough. However, something didn't feel right. Perhaps it was the way she would always shift the topic when work came up, or the way her grin never quite reached her eyes. Nevertheless, I convinced myself that I was only being an overly careful mother. Tommy said, "Mom, we're getting married," at a supper one night. I recall suppressing the nagging sensation in my stomach by feigning a grin and giving them both a hug. When I said, "I'm so happy for you both," I meant it. I wanted to mean it, anyhow. It was a modest yet beautiful wedding. I watched from the front row as my kid made a lifelong commitment to a lady I hardly knew. Robert was also present, along with his new family, which included their adolescent twins and his second wife. We exchanged courteous nods but remained silent. At first, everything appeared to be ok. They both work at the same tech startup and have an apartment across town. Sometimes I would invite them over for supper and observe how Amy's analytical eyes would check everything in the home. However, I had no idea that things would shift so fast or that my quiet existence would soon be appended. Tommy called me when I was at my job. I could tell he had been sobbing since his voice was trembling. "Mom, half the firm is being laid off. Amy and I have both been fired." My heart fell. I'd worked in marketing long enough to know how difficult losing a job was for coworkers. "Honey, take a big breath. Tell me what you require." He spoke the words, "We won't be able to make next month's rent," in a voice that was almost audible. "Our savings, they're pretty much gone." I made a few fast calculations and sent enough cash to pay their apartment's rent for 3 months. I had some savings, and this was my son, but it wasn't much. "This should give you both time to find new jobs," I advised him. In the weeks that followed, there was a mixture of disappointment and hope. Tommy was able to secure a new job at a smaller organization, although the pay was much less than his previous wage. However, I tried not to pass judgment, but Amy's job hunt sounded, at best, apathetic. She would frequently be going through social media rather than job postings when I visited them. Then, as the 3 months were drawing to a conclusion, Tommy called again. "I hate to say it, but is there any possibility that we might spend some time with you, Mom? Until things improve." I considered all the unoccupied rooms as I surveyed my large, deserted home. "Sure, honey. You are aware that there is always room for you here." They arrived on a Sunday afternoon, their car packed with belongings. As I helped them carry boxes up to Tommy's old room, I couldn't help but notice Amy's eyes darting around the house, taking everything in with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. "Caroline," she said, her voice syrupy sweet, "your room is just gorgeous, and that home office setup, it would be perfect for our workspace while we're job hunting. Maybe Tommy and I could take that room. It's bigger, and since there are 2 of us." "I'm sorry, Amy," I said firmly but politely, "but that's my personal space. I need my office for work, and I sometimes have to take calls late at night. Tommy's old room is quite spacious, and you'll have plenty of storage in the guest room across the hall." Her face fell, and though she didn't say anything, the look in her eyes sent a chill down my spine. She pursed her lips and turned away, dragging her suitcase up the stairs with more force than necessary. Tommy gave me an apologetic smile. "Thanks for this, Mom. We really appreciate it." Life settled into a new routine, or at least, that's what I tried to tell myself. Every morning I'd get up at 6 o'clock, make coffee and head to work. Tommy would leave around the same time for his new job. And Amy? Well, Amy would still be asleep. I tried not to think about it too much during those first few days. She's probably still applying for jobs online, I told myself. But as the days went by, a pattern emerged that was impossible to ignore. Each evening when I returned from work, I'd find her exactly where she'd been that morning, sprawled on my living room couch, phone in hand, surrounded by empty snack bags and coffee mugs. The dishes from her lunch would be piled in the sink, crumbs scattered across my kitchen counter. "How was the job search today?" I'd ask, trying to keep my voice light. "Oh, nothing really suitable for my qualifications," she'd reply without looking up from her phone. 2 weeks passed like this. The house, which I'd always kept immaculate, was starting to show signs of neglect. Dust gathered on the furniture, dishes piled up, and laundry overflowed from the hampers. After a particularly long day at work, I decided it was time for a gentle conversation. We were sitting at dinner, a meal I prepared after cleaning the kitchen. First, I cleared my throat nervously. "Amy, honey," I began, keeping my voice as gentle as possible. "I was thinking, since you're home during the day, maybe you could help out a bit with the housework, just until you find a job, of course." The change in her expression was instant. Her fork clattered against the plate, and her eyes welled up with tears. "I knew it," she cried, turning to Tommy. "I knew she'd try to turn me into her maid. Just because I'm temporarily unemployed doesn't mean I should be your mother's servant." I sat there stunned. "Amy, that's not what You've been looking down on me since day one," she interrupted, full on sobbing now. "You think I'm not good enough for your precious son or your precious house." "Amy, please, I didn't mean," but she was already pushing back her chair, running from the table with dramatic flair. Tommy stood up, his face dark with anger. "Mom, I can't believe you'd be so cruel to Amy. She's going through a really tough time right now." After that night, things got even worse. I still did all the cooking and cleaning while they ordered takeout and left their empty containers wherever they finished eating. Out of habit, or maybe hope, I'd still call them to join me for dinner when I cooked. They'd come down, eat without a word, and leave their dirty dishes on the table. The weeks dragged by, each day feeling longer than the last. The sound of the TV from the living room had become a constant backdrop to my home life, along with the gentle tap-tap of Amy's fingers on her phone screen. I tried to stay out of her way, spending more time at the office than necessary, but the situation weighed heavily on my mind. One morning, during our weekly department meeting, our HR director mentioned they were looking for an office manager. My ears perked up immediately. "What's the starting salary?" I asked as casually as I could. $45,000 to start, she replied, but there's room for growth. We promote from within whenever possible. I thought about Amy's resume. She had a business degree and had worked in administration before. This could be perfect. I spent my lunch break drafting a careful text to Amy about the position, but then deleted it. This was the kind of news better delivered in person. I left work early that day, my heart light with hope. Maybe this could be the solution to our problems. I found Amy in her usual spot on the couch, scrolling through her phone. A half-eaten bag of chips lay on the coffee table, crumbs scattered across the surface. "Annie," I said, trying to keep my voice bright and encouraging, "I had some good news. There's an opening at my company for an office manager. It's entry level, but there's real potential for advancement. The starting salary is decent, and I could drive you to work. We could commute together." She shot up from the couch, sending the chip bag flying. "Are you serious right now? An office manager? Do you know what my qualifications are?" I just thought. You thought what? That I'd be happy to fetch coffee and organize paper clips. Her voice was rising with each word. "I have a business degree. I was a project coordinator." "Amy, please, I didn't mean—" "Oh, I know exactly what you meant," she shrieked. "You think I'm a freeloader. You think I'm lazy. You can't stand the fact that I'm not working, so you're trying to force me into some degrading position." Just then, Tommy walked through the front door, his timing impossibly bad. "What's going on?" he asked, looking between us. Amy rushed to him, tears streaming down her face. "Your mother just insulted me again. She thinks I'm a freeloader. She's trying to force me to take some menial job as an office manager." I stood up, my hands shaking. "Tommy, that's not true. I was just trying to help. There's an opening at my company, and I thought—" "Mom, stop." Tommy's voice cut through the room like a knife. "Why do you always have to do this? Why can't you just leave Amy alone?" "Do what?" I asked, genuinely confused. "I'm just trying to help." "Help?" Amy scoffed through her tears. "You're trying to humiliate me." She ran up the stairs, her dramatic sobs echoing through the house. Tommy gave me a look of pure disappointment. "I never thought you could be so difficult to live with, Mom," he said, shaking his head. "You're constantly starting drama. It's like you can't help yourself." He followed his wife upstairs, leaving me standing alone in the living room. I sank back into my chair, my half-finished coffee growing cold in my hands. "Starting drama," I whispered to myself, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. In all my 62 years, no one had ever accused me of being dramatic. The days turned into weeks, and I learned to keep my mouth shut about the job situation. The mere mention of work would make Amy's eyes narrow dangerously, so I stopped bringing it up altogether. It was easier that way, even if it meant watching her waste her days away on my couch. Things changed when Tommy got his first big commission at work. Suddenly, Amy was going out more often, returning with shopping bags from expensive boutiques and fresh manicures that probably cost more than our weekly grocery bill. Not once did she think to pick up laundry detergent or paper towels. Those mundane household items remained my responsibility. I kept hoping that with Tommy's improved income, they'd start looking for their own place. Each morning, I'd check the local rental listings on my phone, imagining them finding a nice apartment across town. But they seemed perfectly content to stay put, making themselves more and more at home in my house. One evening, I came home to find Annie excitedly chatting on her phone in my living room. "Oh my God, yes, the house is absolutely perfect for a party," she was saying. "You should see the vintage chandelier in the dining room. It'll look amazing in photos." I sat down my briefcase, my stomach already nodding. "What party?" I asked. She hung up and turned to Tommy, who had just walked in. "Babe, we should definitely have our anniversary party here. Can you believe it's been almost 2 years? Where exactly are you planning to have this party?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Here, of course," Amy gestured around my living room. "This house is gorgeous, Caroline. All our friends will love it. I'm thinking we could set up the bar in the foyer and maybe move some furniture around in the living room to create a dance floor." "Shouldn't you have asked me first?" I interrupted, trying to keep my voice level, but Amy was already scrolling through her phone. "We should invite the Hendersons and maybe that new couple from your office, Tommy. Oh, and we absolutely need to call that catering company we used for New Year's." I turned to Tommy, hoping he'd say something, but he was nodding along with his wife's plans, a smile on his face. Later that evening, I cornered Tommy in the kitchen. "Mom, I know what you're going to say," he started, "but it would mean so much to Amy. She's been feeling down lately, and this would really lift her spirits. This is my house, Tommy. You can't just decide to throw a party here without asking me first." "Please, Mom," he gave me that look, the same one he used to give me when he wanted extra dessert as a child. "I promise we'll take care of everything. I'll even hide a cleaning service to come in afterward. You won't have to lift a finger." I stood there looking at my son, this man who used to be the considerate boy I raised, and felt my resolve crumbling. "Fine," I sighed, already knowing I'd regret this decision, "but I want everything back in its proper place afterward." "Thanks, Mom. You're the best." He hugged me quickly and bounded up the stairs to tell Amy the good news. The week leading up to the party was a whirlwind of activity, none of which I was included in. Emmy took over my house like a general planning a military campaign. Delivery trucks came and went, bringing everything from fancy tablecloths to crystal champagne flutes. She rearranged my furniture without asking, pushing my favorite reading chair into a corner to make room for a makeshift dance floor. I kept my distance, retreating to my office whenever possible. Still, I couldn't help but overhear her endless phone conversations about appetizer selections and wine choices. My grandmother's antique vase was moved to make room for elaborate flower arrangements, and my family photos were taken down to be replaced with string lights and paper lanterns. Friday afternoon, I left work early. I had even bought a new dress for the occasion. Nothing too fancy, just a simple navy blue cocktail dress that I thought would be appropriate. As I pulled into my driveway, I could see cars already lining the street. I took a deep breath and walked up to my own front door. Inside, the house was barely recognizable. The furniture had been pushed against the walls, creating an open space in the center where people were already dancing. The air was thick with the smell of catering food and expensive perfume. Amy spotted me from across the room. She was wearing a short silver dress that caught the light from the newly installed party lights, her hair and makeup professionally done. She excused herself from the group she was talking to and walked over to me, her face fixed in an artificial smile. "Caroline," she said, her voice sickly sweet but loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "I thought you'd be gone by now." I blinked in confusion. Gone? Why would I be gone? "Oh," she tilted her head, her smile never wavering. "I guess I forgot to mention this party is really just for our friends. You know, young people. I assumed you'd make other arrangements for the evening, maybe get a hotel room." I stood there stunned as a few of her friends nearby giggled into their champagne glasses. "This is my house," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, and you've been so generous letting us use it," Amy said, patting my arm condescendingly. "But you have to understand, having someone's mom at an anniversary party is kind of a buzzkill." I looked past her to Tommy, who was standing nearby, watching this exchange. Surely he wouldn't allow this. Surely he would step in and defend me. "Mom," he said, walking over, "Amy's right. This is really more of a young people's party. It might be better if you weren't here." In that moment, something inside me, something that had been stretching thinner and thinner over the past months, finally snapped. Without a word, I turned and walked away. I turned and walked up the stairs behind me. I could hear Amy's smug voice. See? I knew she'd be reasonable about this. She's probably just gone to pack an overnight bag. I entered Tommy's old room, their room now, and pulled their suitcases from under the bed. My hands were steady as I began emptying drawers, folding nothing, just throwing their clothes into the bags, designer dresses, expensive suits, all the things they'd bought with Tommy's new salary, into the suitcase as they went. I stripped the bed, wrapped their toiletries in a towel, and added those too. The music thumped below as I dragged the heavy suitcases down the stairs, one in each hand. The sound of them bumping against each step drew everyone's attention. The crowd parted as I entered the living room, faces turning from their conversations to watch the scene unfold. "Mom," Tommy's voice cracked. "What are you doing?" I dropped the suitcases in the middle of the makeshift dance floor. "You're leaving now. The party's over." Amy's face contorted with rage. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" she screamed. "You can't do this. This is my house." I said, my voice deadly calm, "You have exactly 5 minutes to leave before I call the police and have you removed for trespassing." "Mom, come on." Tommy laughed nervously. "You're joking, right?" I pulled out my phone. 4 minutes. The guests began shuffling toward the door, muttering among themselves. Some were already calling Ubers. "You deranged old fool." Amy stepped toward me, her finger pointed at my face. I moved so quickly it surprised even me, closing the distance between us until we were nose to nose. "Call me one more name," I said, my voice low and dangerous, "and I'll show you exactly how much fight this old fool has left in her. Try me." The color drained from Amy's face. She stumbled backward, grabbing the nearest suitcase. Tommy stood frozen for a moment before reaching for the second bag. "Mom," he started, "get out." They walked to the door, Amy still muttering curses under her breath. Tommy looked back once, but I had already turned away, beginning to take down the tacky decorations they'd hung on my walls. After they left, I surveyed the abandoned party scene. Tables loaded with untouched food, half-empty champagne glasses scattered everywhere. My grandmother's vase, thankfully, still intact. I began boxing up the catering trays. The local homeless shelter was still open. At least some good could come from all this food. The weeks after the party passed quietly. Too quietly, perhaps, but after months of chaos, the silence in my house felt like a blessing. I put everything back in its proper place. My reading chair returned to its spot by the window, my family photos back on the walls, my grandmother's vase as the centerpiece on the dining room table. In small towns, news spreads quickly. My friend Sarah, a real estate agent, informed me. In the new complex across town, Tommy and Amy had taken a 2-bedroom apartment. Over coffee one morning, she remarked, "It's funny that Janet from the leasing office is an old friend." Claims that while they nearly failed the credit check, Tommy's new pay just managed to get them accepted. I took a drink of my coffee and remained silent. Tales began to circulate. During periodic inspections, the property manager had previously issued 2 warnings on the condition of their unit, according to Martha, whose niece resides in the same building. Martha shook her head and admitted, "The place is a mess. Dishes in the sink for days, garbage heaping up. Does that sound familiar?" Reminiscent of my own kitchen during their visit, I just nodded. Word of the arguments then spread. They weren't really tactful about it. Through the walls, the neighbors could hear them. Amy yells about Tommy's pitiful pay, how she's tired of living in a shithole, and how none of her friends have to live this way. Tommy is retaliating against her for not wanting to work, cook, clean, or do anything else at all. During our monthly lunch, my friend Linda muttered, "They say she throws things sometimes." One night last week, Tommy was spotted dozing off in his vehicle. Every anecdote made me feel a bit sorry for Tommy, not for Amy, as I had already wasted my pity on her. In spite of everything, he was still my son. My finger hovers over his number when I occasionally pick up the phone, but I always put it down again. He has a lesson to learn and a route to follow. Now the home feels different. Waiting, definitely, but tranquil. Like it. No, the narrative doesn't finish here. Some evenings, while enjoying a cup of tea in my reading chair, I gaze at the pictures on the wall, including Tommy's graduation, his first baseball game, and the two of us at the beach when he was 10. I recall the young child who would come to me with broken toys and injured knees, believing that Mom could mend everything. But I can't help him with this. He must see it for himself in order to comprehend his current state and return to the person I brought up. I'll stay here at our family home until then, keeping his room prepared in case something comes up. Not for Amy. That bridge is utterly destroyed, but for my kid when he's prepared to express regret, have a conversation and start over. Meanwhile, I'm taking back my life. I took weekend painting lessons, joined a reading group, and even acquired a kitten from the neighborhood shelter. Oliver is his name, and he's a great companion. He purrs happily while I read in the evenings, and neither of us feels the need to fill the void with meaningless chatter. Life carries on as usual. Tommy will also know where to locate me when he's ready.